Hello, and here I am with my promised SHARDATHON reading recommendations, and let's jump right into it. So the first prompt for Galadon is change, and so I have 3 recommendations for each of the prompts. I should have said that before. My first for Galadon Change is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which is a book where the main character, Star, unfortunately witnesses her best friend brutally murdered at the hands of a police officer for absolutely no reason at all, and this prompts her to try to effect change in her society. It's incredibly hard-hitting. You don't need me to tell you that. Everybody knows that this book is fantastic, and if you haven't read it yet, this is the perfect excuse, not that you need one. My second suggestion is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the start of an epic fantasy series, so a little bit of an endeavour for a readathon, but you know, if you want a challenge, this one is definitely a challenge. It's a pretty chunky boy. It's 503 pages long, but it does go very fast, and this I'm recommending because in this world the magic is called scriving, and it allows you to write on items in this specific language and change how they function. So you could write on a wheel that it is going downhill, and so it will always think that it is going downhill, and it will therefore constantly rotate. And in this one we follow Sanchia, who is a thief who steals an artifact that ends up getting her in a lot of trouble. And then finally, for something a little bit on the lighter side, we have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This one looks pretty long, but it is romance and contemporary and pretty quick and easy to read, in my opinion. This one is 395 pages as well, so it's not even as long as it looks. And this one is a hate to love romance about Olive and Ethan, who hate each other and for reasons that I won't explain have to go on honeymoon together and pretend that they don't hate each other, and it's hate to love, so their feelings about each other change. Next up we have Serene Underestimate. The first thing I'm going to recommend is the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. Now this is book 8. I of course recommend that you start with book 1. This is just the one that I had out and easily to hand, but the reason I think this satisfies the prompt of underestimate is because it's a middle grade series, and so I think a lot of adult readers would underestimate how truly fantastic this series is. I'm not going to talk about this for too long because I mention it all the time, but truly this series is incredible. Then we have Alex in Wonderland by Simon James Green. That follows Alex, who thinks he might be queer, but he's not really sure, and his family underestimate him, and he ends up getting a job at an amusement arcade for the summer and makes a lot of new friends. This is absolutely hilarious. I was in stitches virtually the entire time I was reading this, so if you need something fun and light and easy to read that's going to give you a bit of a chuckle, this is what I would recommend. And then one that combines a couple of interpretations of the prompt underestimate is Solway by Lupita Nyong'o and Vashti Harrison, or illustrated by Vashti Harrison I should say. And this, as you can tell, is a children's picture book, so it's very, very short, so you might underestimate the impact that this could have, but actually it's a really meaningful story about colorism, and Solway, the main character, very much underestimates herself because of the colour of her skin. She's much darker than the rest of her family, much darker than all of her friends, and she's trying to do everything she can to change that. And I won't tell you anything else about this story, but it's so incredibly powerful, and it will literally take you 10 minutes to read this. I mean, it's so short and there's virtually no words in here. It's a children's picture book, but I highly, highly, strongly super recommend it. It's amazing. Next up we have Hrathen plan. And my first recommendation for this is another Christina Lauren book. This one is Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, which follows Josh and Hazel, who become best friends and set each other up or plan blind dates for each other. And they go on these blind dates together. And this is just so much fun. I mean, it's a romance story. You know where it's going, but it's just incredibly sweet and fun. It's relatively short and really quick and easy to read. It's 306 pages, but a very quick 306 pages, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself both times that I've read it, because yes, I've read this and The On Honeymooners twice, because they're just such feel-good stories. Next up we have a fantasy. This one is Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez, which is a Bolivian-inspired fantasy story about Jimena, who is the decoy condessa. And the condessa has been overthrown by these external interlopers, and so they come up with a plan for Jimena to infiltrate the enemy's city to try and wrest back control from them for her condessa. But this goes in a lot of really unexpected directions, and I read it earlier this year. The magic is wonderful. I'm not going to tell you about it because you have to experience it for yourself, but it's just wonderful. I really enjoyed this. And then we have a sci-fi, and this one is The Sound of Stars by Alicia Dow, which is kind of a story where aliens have colonized Earth. It's not even that they've just invaded Earth, they've colonized Earth, and they have just a select few humans left alive under the control of these various alien species, one of whom is a main character, but he's also lab grown, so he's not your typical alien. And we also follow Ellie, who is running an illegal library, and then one of her books goes missing and she has to plan how to get it back, and then there are unlikely alliances. This was probably my most surprising read of the year. I expected to like it, but I did not expect to love it quite as much as I do. This is fantastic. Not enough people have read this. Even if you don't pick it up for Shardathon, please put it on your TBR and read it at some point, because it's just so great. Next up, we're moving on to Dilaf and Zeal, and my first recommendation is Raw by Cora Carmack, which was actually a recent read for me. And the reason I'm recommending it for the prompt Zeal is because I don't want to say too much to give away spoilers, but some of the royals in this story have some very particular ideas about how things should go, and they're very zealous about that, overly zealous about that, and it doesn't necessarily match up with what our protagonist Aurora wants for her life. So I don't really want to say any more than that. You'll have to just trust me when I say that this meets the prompt. And it's a super quick and easy fantasy read. Very tropey, but very enjoyable, in my opinion. Next up, we have The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller, which follows two characters who are not good people. They're not good people. Neither of them is a good person. They're both very much out for themselves. They're both very much driven by their own desires, and they're pretty much willing to do anything to get what they want. But there's just something so enjoyable and fun about reading about these two just awful people being awful and doing awful things, but you still root for them. How does that work? I don't know, but it was great. And then finally for Zeal, we have The Wicked King by Kay Enkram. This is a very different kind of interpretation of Zeal. This follows August and Jack, and Jack starts to experience very vivid hallucinations, and August is trying to help him with dealing with the fact that he's experiencing these hallucinations, and they are so tactile and real to him, but also there's a very codependent relationship between these two characters. It's not especially healthy, and it ends up getting them in a lot of very difficult situations. So I think that this is a really great read for the prompt of zeal, but also please check out the trigger warnings for this before you consider picking it up, because it is very dark. And then finally we have Galadon Safe. So the first recommendation I have for this is Illuminae by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This one follows some characters as they flee, hopefully to safety, from their planet that has been attacked by terrorists, but no one's coming to rescue them because their planet is illegal. And then things on the ships that they're using to flee to safety start going wrong. This is told in a multimedia format, and this whole series is just incredible. It's YA sci-fi, but it's just so great, so gripping, so quick and easy to read. It's quite a long book. It's like 600 pages, but it flies by, let me tell you. It's really great. Next up, I would recommend interpreting the prompt by picking an author that you feel safe reading, someone that you enjoy basically everything they ever write. So for me, one of those would be Alice Oseman. For my own TBR, I've chosen Brandon Sanderson. He's another. But Alice Oseman is definitely one of my auto-buy authors who I feel very safe reading. This is her latest release, Loveless, and I would highly recommend this one. This follows Georgia, who goes to university and she really wants to find love, but it's just not working out for her. She finds the whole concept uncomfortable, but she desperately wants it for herself. And she comes to the realization, not a spoiler because it's on the back, that she's actually Arrow Ace, and she has to kind of figure out what that means for her in her life and discover how maybe romantic love isn't the only kind of love. And then if you want a book to make you feel safe, The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. 100%. This book is incredible. So whimsical, so magical, so adorable. It follows Linus, who essentially is a children's social worker, but this is kind of a fantasy world where the children in the orphanages that he is inspecting, because that's his job, to inspect these orphanages and decide whether it's safe for the community for them to stay open. So that's another interpretation of the word safe with this book. These orphanages actually house magical children, and then he gets sent on a very specific assignment to the house in the Cerulean Sea, which houses some very, very special magical children, and he's there to figure out whether or not it's safe for that orphanage to stay open. But the children in this are wonderful, the relationships in this are wonderful. Linus is such a great character. This book is incredible. It is worth all the hype, I promise you. Just read it, please. And that's it. Those are my recommendations. If you are participating in Shardathon, keep an eye on Instagram because I will be running giveaways again throughout the readathon. Let me know down in the comments if you are participating in Shardathon round 2, and if so, whether you have your TBR planned or whether you're now tempted to pick up any of these recommendations. I'm really looking forward to the second round of this readathon and reading with all of you. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks! Bye!